Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Conservatives Cool Talk Radio. This is your host, Wayne Bradley. Thank you for joining me tonight. I've got a very special guest on the show this evening, author Erik Rush, who first probably nationally acclaimed for actually exposing the ties between President Obama and his radical leader, Jeremiah Wright. Erik Rush has got a new book called Negrophilia, From Slave Block to Pedestal, America's Racial Obsession. Erik, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on.
Thank you. Before we get started talking about the book and all, could you just give all my listeners a little bit of your background? You have quite an interesting story.
Yes, I was born in 1961 in New York City. I'm the first child of a white father and black mother. For a while we lived in the same neighborhood as Malcolm X's widow and children. I guess, my folks were just, they were educated professional people. I lived in some predominantly black and predominantly white neighborhoods. And, the book is, I guess, about the observations of a lifetime. But, we can get into that in a bit.
Right. And I guess that's one of the things that can you explain? Let's go ahead. Let's get into the book a little bit. We got a lot of stuff to talk about. But before we get into the book, I want to talk to you a little bit about what's been going on this week. We've had obviously the NAACP make a resolution, condemning basically the Tea Party's calling them racist. What do you think about that?
Well, I think it's I believe it's just a political ploy. For the last several decades, the hard left has hijacked the civil rights agenda. The NAACP has essentially become an arm of that of the hard left, as have a lot of civil rights organizations. Civil rights activism has become more of an industry than a calling. It is the NAACP and the Obama administration, as well as a lot of other political factions on the left, have a political imperative in keeping black Americans angry and suspicious and cynical and jaded, and in delivering the sorts of messages that we saw this week delivered by Michelle Obama and some of the other people who had something to say over there.
Right. Do you think the main reason to keep people fired up like this is because of the political season in general, or is it just to kind of just ignite the troops and to keep them, I would say, passionate about some of these racial issues?
Well, the election season coming up does have something to do with it. Part of it has to do with Obama's numbers being low. Part of it also has to do with the agenda that the administration, as well as the hard left, has in culturally balkanizing us. The more they have these various splinter groups, interest groups, whether they be economic or racial or what have you, as long as they have people identifying with something other than American, they are not going to notice that their country is being taken away.
Right. Do you think the president have they done a good job of, or do they have the help? I guess that's the best way. They have the help of the American media to distract people. So they've quietly gone around and changed a lot of things through this country, and it hasn't got the attention of people because basically the mainstream media is in the pocket of the administration. Do you believe that?
Absolutely. The mainstream media, which I like to call the establishment press because they really aren't mainstream anymore, they are essentially of the same ideology as the administration. So I believe that anyone of Obama's political temperament would be getting a pretty the media would have a soft spot for them. But I believe that given the sensibilities that I describe in my book, there is a certain amount of deference that's being paid to him because he is black, and that is one of the reasons I believe that some of his backers really had really wanted him in there, because I think with some of the white guilt and the people who were going to feel good about electing the first black president, a lot of what he really was about was slipped stealthily by people with the help of the establishment press.
Now, when you actually were the one that broke the story about Jeremiah Wright. One, how did you find out about him? And as a Christian yourself, I've read, how did you feel about listening to some of his sermons?
Well, I view the so-called theology that is practiced in those churches, such as Jeremiah Wright's, which is black liberation theology. As a Christian, I look at it as apostasy. As far as how I found out about it, there is a journalist in Chicago named Fran Eaton who contacted me because she knew, this was early 2007, knew that Obama was going to declare and run for the presidency, and some of the people who think more along the lines of the way I do were kind of scared because they knew what he was about, they knew what church he went to, and so she asked through a third party if I might be able to look at it and see if I could get any traction with it, because she had not been able to. So I did my own research and was duly appalled from as an American and as a Christian, never mind as a someone of color. And so I wrote a column for the New Media Journal, and that got picked up by Sean Hannity, who was then on Hannity and Combs, and the rest, as they say, was history.
Right. Exactly. Well, I appreciate you I know that story's probably brought you some grief from some people, but I appreciate you actually bringing that out, because again, as a Christian, listening to some of those sermons and things he said, I just couldn't believe that was being said in church. Far less in maybe in the back hall in the pool room somewhere, but in church as the man of the pulpit, that was definitely offensive. So thank you for trying to enlighten people about and pre-warning people of what was to come. Let's talk a little bit more about your book. The title alone I'm sure gets a lot of attention from people. Negrophilia, From Slave Block to Pedestal, America's Racial Obsession. Let's talk more about that book. What made you decide to write the book, and what are the things that you saw that again motivated you to get this book out here?
Well, when as I grew up, as I said, it's the book is based on the observations of a lifetime, and despite the fact that there was a lot of inequity in the political and racial relations when I was growing up, I saw that there were a lot of black Americans who were doing very well compared to a lot of people in general. I mean, having businesses and rental properties and retiring to Florida and things like that. And then, the civil rights movement came and things started to improve, yet I saw the children and grandchildren of these people crashing and burning, having babies out of wedlock, shooting dope, going to the penitentiary, even though in greater numbers than before. And that, was sort of like, geez, what's going on with this? And over the course of many years, it became clearer and clearer that the reason that this was happening was because they were basically black Americans were being shepherded to the left by the far left that hijacked the civil rights agenda and basically kept this the entitlement mentality, the dependency going with the social programs, the cynicism and mistrust through these career civil rights activists. And so you get to a place where in 2010, people are asking themselves, well, gee, why are race relations so, in the toilet now after all of this, and as far as we've come? So that is essentially why I wrote the book. Okay.
And now some of the things that you were talking about in the book is it goes back to the ideas of the special treatment now that African Americans get through, whether it be through the media, through politicians, through celebrities, and that sort of thing. Can you talk a little bit more about that and the obsession?
Well, yeah. On the one hand, the general public has been conditioned by politicians, activists, the press, entertainment to pay special deference to Black Americans, to look at them almost as better than whites or anyone else because they were oppressed and they wouldn't have done the same thing, and that somehow Black Americans do not suffer from the same human frailties as everyone else. At the same time, they have demonized whites. Now, they put out this sort of worldview or this erroneous perception of blacks, while at the same time sort of stabbing them in the back politically through the dependency, the poor education, the sort of condescending relationship that they have with them in terms of being a voting bloc, and you have to basically step and fetch and do what we tell you and be grateful that you've benefited from our largesse.
Right. Gotcha. And do you think that a lot of the culture, a lot of the stereotypes and things like that, does it come from we have so many different ways of getting information now, obviously through entertainment with music and sports and things like that. How do you think that's affected the psyche and how people look at the, African Americans right now?
Well, there is fortunately for technology, I mean, a lot of people have been able to learn a lot and become less intimidated and afraid. Thus, the America I see, I go out and I see people interacting on the level of what Dr. King used to talk about, and making discernments based on the content of people's character. Unfortunately, some of the press and the entertainment that has come out over the years from the far left has underscored or accentuated some of the worst aspects of what people like to call black culture. Consequently, you have people glorifying the disrespect of women and the disrespect of authority and the kinds of things that come out of the gangster rap culture, which is not representative of the mainstream black community. And the illusion that people get is that it is. Yet, if you criticize it, you are either racist or a race traitor, depending on your color. Right.
So, like people that think that if they're watching MTV and things of that nature, they kind of think that all black people are either rappers or athletes or something like that. But if you, like you're saying, if you actually speak against it or say something about it, you can, like you said, labeled as a racist. What do you think that we can do to uplift the culture? What do you think we can do to change some of those stereotypes? And what kind of leaders do we possibly need to help with that kind of situation?
Well, I think that, I talk about this in the book, and I offer some ideas, and I hope that it will go some distance towards changing these things. But I think it's going to take quite a while. I was speaking to a black conservative today, a radio host, he was expressing how it's just not happening fast enough, and we need more outspoken black conservatives. I do agree with that, but I also think that there are some things that we need to address on a larger scale, which will help this thing along, and that being getting the educational system out of the control of the far left, where it's been for the last 40, going on 50 years. That would definitely help.
Right.
Letting the market take care of the, put the stake through the heart, basically, of the establishment press. This is one of the reasons that the Obama administration wants to get through that so-called fairness doctrine, because they want to hurt the alternative press.
Right.
People are starting to see that they're being lied to, and unfortunately, black Americans were more vulnerable at the end of the civil rights movement, so that they were really preyed upon by the hard left more easily. But I think that, the more people are allowed to to make their own judgments, go online, listen to the radio, their perceptions will change. But as far as the people, whether they're black, white, whatever, who know the truth and who see what's going on, they really have to resign themselves to the fact that they have to speak their truth and realize they're going to take some lumps, that they're going to be called names and racist or race traitors or what have you. But, my view is that if the Freedom Marchers could take the abuse that they took, then we could stand to be called a few names.
Exactly. Have you always identified yourself as, being in line with conservative values, or was that something that kind of evolved over time?
Interestingly enough, I really have always had that, as I became politically conscious as a young adult, I really was always more conservative than anything else. My folks raised me. They didn't really raise me with any particular political bent. They were, sort of FDR, JFK, Democrats, but that would be considered arch conservatives these days. They basically, as far as color went, if you were a decent person, you were a decent person. If you were a bigoted idiot, you were a bigoted idiot, and it didn't matter what color you were. But I really, by the time I was, 18, 19, I could see that there were some things going on that were not in keeping with what we were being told in school, and that were coming out of the mouths of the people we saw on TV. And so I had some friends who we got into a lot of political discussions, and, were much more independently thinking than some of my peers, I guess. It's just something that kind of happened.
Right. How do we, a lot of times I try to explain to people, for a very long time, black people voted Republican up until maybe the, civil rights era. That's when it really changed the pendulum swung to where it was a Democratic thing. How do we educate people, and how do we, kind of get the message out there, or is that something that needs to be put more back into the hands of the GOP and making them be more proactive? What do you think?
I think part of the problem is that the GOP has, their leadership has still got a lot of people in there who sell themselves as conservatives and who really are not. I don't think it's a matter of they don't want the support of black Americans, or they don't care, or they don't know how to talk to them. They don't think in the same way that conservatives do, because a conservative would say, hey, I'm going to reach out to these people. I'm going to tell them the truth. I'm going to let them know how things are, and if they accept it, fine. If they don't, they don't. As opposed to the GOP over the last few, 30 years or so, which has done absolutely nothing. I mean, they didn't even fight when the Democrat Party reinvented itself and started demonizing the GOP. I mean, they should have come out and, nipped that in the bud. Instead, they did nothing. So I think when conservatives basically do to the GOP what the hard left did with the Democrat Party, then you'll start getting some people in there who are willing to put the effort and the resources into not just reaching out to black conservatives and supporting them, which they definitely need to do, but also putting some educational materials and programs together, not stuff that's going to cost a lot of money, just stuff in terms of getting their message out, where it's going to make, black voters sit up and take notice and start looking into some of these things, because, we didn't have the information technology we have now back in 1960, but in 1960 it was common knowledge among black Americans that the Democrat Party was the party of slavery and segregation. Now you ask somebody who's 30 years old, who's a black man who's 30 years old, what was the party of slavery and segregation? They're going to tell you the Republicans.
Exactly. I think that's the most frustrating part is when I'm, like I said, I'm right around that age, and as I talk to, a lot of my friends, I think when Kanye West said that during the Katrina thing, that kind of resonated, and a lot of people, about, George Bush doesn't care about black people, and that's the attitude that a lot of people in my peer group, I mean, I get a lot of flack about that, about being a Republican, about supporting the people I've supported. And again, I always tell people, do your background, do your history to really understand who you're supporting out here. And I just, like I said, that's kind of like something a passion of mine and understanding, like, what do we do to, like, further advance that and get people more up to date on what really happened.
Well, you look at any culture, particularly the cultures that, the people who have come to the United States from other countries over history, and, you look at the ones who have done well, or you look at any individual American who has done well, and it always comes down to education, education, education. And it doesn't matter if the person is well-schooled or self-educated, because, you got people out there like, that guy from Virgin Airlines, Richard Branson from the UK, the guy's got a sixth-grade education, and the guy's a billionaire. I mean, there are people, the people have to have the motivation to find these things out for themselves, and that's one of the things that, one of the reasons I say we've got to get the school system away from the far left and start really using those education dollars to educate kids in the things they need to be educated in, not social engineering.
Those are the things that I think the NAACP should be at the forefront of if they want to get involved, if they want to remain relevant in today's, as far as organizations. They ought to be really pushing the button on the inequities of education in urban America. To me, I think that would be their number one cause, not trying to, cause attention by making resolutions towards the Tea Party. Let's talk a little bit more about America's racial obsession. How would you describe America's racial obsession?
Well, the fact that the race card gets played so much and that people are so sensitive about anything that has to do with race is part and parcel of the conditioning that we have had from the hard left, regardless of what color we happen to be. And sometimes it's so subtle we don't even realize on an individual basis that we've been affected in the way that we have. And, that is just the reason that we believe that way, or that we have those tendencies and sensitivities and all of this sort of thing, is because of the data that we have been getting for so many years from politicians and activists and so forth. But for them, ironically enough, it isn't about race at all. It's about control. And unfortunately, if you look at Barack Obama, race is not the issue for him. Power is the issue. And if the NAACP, you were just talking about all the good that they could do with their resources, and what's just, breaks your heart is the fact that they have that political imperative to stay at the side of the table with the hard left, which actually has a malignant agenda for Black America. That's what makes you want to tear your teeth out.
Right. That's what I wrote about that yesterday on my blog. Is that it seems like they've just, that's common knowledge now at this point. They have pretty much sold out to become, to sit at the table with the Democratic Party. It always amazes me. I'm in Detroit, and we have the biggest Freedom Fund dinner every year. And my dad is heavily involved in that. And I asked him, like, Dad, why can't we bring J.C. Watts in as the lead speaker? Last year they had Jeremiah Wright as the lead speaker for the Freedom Fund dinner in the NAACP, but within a year's time, they're condemning racism out of the Tea Parties. It doesn't make sense to me. And again, I think they could definitely use their resources to help with the plight on that. You got abortion, running, the whole family value system in the African American community. Something that they could address, work with the black pastors that they're also so tightly knitted with. To obviously helping improve the urban environment.
Yeah, I agree with you 1,000%. I really wish that they would do that, because they certainly have the resources and the manpower and the connections to do it. Unfortunately, they are it's sort of like at this point asking Dracula to stop sucking blood. their political clout and their right now a lot of their funding, it comes from these far left, hard left, politicians. Everyone they're allied with, someone like Jeremiah Wright, his bread and butter is black liberation theology, and so he's not going to stop pushing that. It's really quite sad, and it's really ironic, of course, that the same people who will call me an Oreo and an Uncle Tom and a sellout and a Quisling and all of these things. I look at them as though they're sellouts because they're on the side of the table with these people who have been just, who have practically destroyed the black community, with the exception of those folks who have got the either the gumption or the good upbringing or the education
right.
or whatever, who have been able to succeed on their own merits.
Do you believe, and this is the problem out there, do you believe that they want to keep, in particular, the larger portion of the black community in a situation where they're always hoping instead of actually succeeding, because that's their voting block? I mean, that's how they sell people on voting for them every 4 years. That we're going to help you out. If they actually learn how to do things for themselves, they might not need that kind of help. And do you think that's part of their plan, to keep people in that perpetual motion, almost running in the hamster wheel?
I really do. And with the politicians, it's more of a political imperative, and with the activists, it's more of an economic imperative. And it's unfortunate that that's the case, and it is a human failing. I mean, it's not something that a lot of, and whatever color you happen to be, you can get, you can succumb to the temptation of fortune and glory and doing it in an amoral sort of way. But I think it's really, really sad that, we had all of the people fighting the way they did during the civil rights movement and, fighting and dying and everything that went on. And then you have these people who basically hijack the entire train and are trying to run it off the track.
Right. What do you think, as far as leaders, conservative leaders, I look up to people like J.C. Watts. Do you see have you been, as you travel the country and things like that, have you been seeing more African Americans getting involved with the GOP and obviously with, conservative values?
Absolutely. They definitely are. The fact, there are people who say to me, I don't think there's that many, or there's not enough, or what have you. I mean, granted, I would love to see a lot more, but the fact is that they are starting to throw their hats in the ring more. The fact is that, whites are still an overwhelming majority, so percentage-wise, it still appears as though black conservatives are not doing as much. But with the advent of the sort of Tea Party mentality and people getting really, really concerned about what's going on with their country, you do have percentage-wise just as many black folks who are jumping in there and getting involved. It just doesn't appear that there are as many because there are proportionally less black Americans than there are white ones.
Then when you start actually adding in the ones that are politically active, it really shaves that number almost in half, unfortunately. So do you think a lot of that has to do with Obama? That's one thing I'm almost willing to give him a little bit more credit for, is the fact that since he's gotten involved, now black conservatives have been given a larger platform and opportunities, because, it's almost like he broke down that barrier, but now there's more acceptance of, not even, I shouldn't say acceptance, but more people are willing to listen to black conservative voices. Do you think that's partly the case, and is that part of the Obama effect?
Yeah, actually, I think inadvertently it has become that what you're describing has taken place, and I think that is sort of a barrier that was broken more so in the media and even among some of the conservative media, because so now we have our first black president, and he happens to be a really, really, really far left guy. So what do other black folks think? The conservatives, as well as Black Americans who were on the left, because, as you know as well as I do, that there are some blacks on the left for whom, they don't think Obama's doing enough and they're not quite happy with him. So it definitely did open the door for the media in particular, but also political circles to take a harder look at what black conservatives have to say.
Right. I mean, I just, like with Michael Steele becoming the president of the RNC, I mean, you can't deny the fact that the chances of that would have been a lot slimmer if President Obama hadn't been elected. I don't like to think that they just did it strictly for that, but, I mean, the door was opened, and that's part of, I guess, maybe some of the positives of that. Were you proud of Obama being elected, or were you just, as me as an African-American, I was proud that he was elected, but I really was, like I said, concerned from day one about his policies?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm continually grateful for the way things have gone in terms of how the general population has sort of reformed and matured to the point where, they didn't have, it wasn't too long ago where I would have told you there is no way they're going to elect a black man for president.
Right.
And it happened. However, given that I knew so much about this guy, my thoughts were more along the lines of, why couldn't it have been somebody who had more of the political leanings of a J.C. Watts or an Alan Key? Why did it have to be this guy?
Right. Yeah, that's kind of a lot of people I've talked to, conservatives alike, said that was the one quote I've heard a couple people say, and I think I said it today, that I really had plans on J.C. Watts probably being our first black president. And like I said, I guess some of his policies, he's a very pro-abortion. He's pushing for gay rights. It's just a lot of stuff that I don't think in the African American community that they're either aware of, or they're just giving it a blind eye because he is black. But I mean, these are typically things, because we're raised in religious households, of faith, that we would shun. We wouldn't think that's acceptable. And at this point, I kind of think that some of these things he's been given a pass on, because of him being African American, whether it be through through the voters or through the media. I don't think they've pressed hard enough, and they never did ask enough questions.
No, you're absolutely right. Something just occurred to me pertaining to your question about the black conservatives becoming more visible. And the religious, growing up in religious households. There are a few, and I'm sure you know that there are a few prominent conservative black pastors who have absolutely no use for Obama, and with the administration and the establishment press are desperately trying to ignore these men because not only are they black conservative, but they have a Christian viewpoint, and those, that is something that they're going to, someone like that they would consider even more dangerous than me, because they're going to speak to a black community that is not that far removed from having been very godly and church-going and all of that. And if they start seeing these men and having that trust and that connection with, okay, he can relate, he's black too, and he starts talking about, the far left and, these traitors, sitting at the table with the white progressives, that's not going to be good news for people like Obama.
No, I agree with that. I agree. And do you think that, like I said, I remember when Bill Clinton made a few off-brand comments about him. He was almost labeled a racist. And that right then, that was right when the election in the primary, when it was beginning. I said, wow, Bill Clinton can't say anything about Obama. Who can? And that's pretty much still the case now. You don't see much, you don't hear too many people criticizing him without something coming right back at them for criticizing him in the first place.
Well, yeah, when people started talking, when like independents who didn't really have a dog in the fight, white independents who voted for Obama, started talking about how they didn't like this policy or that policy, they were accused of racism. And, I mean, that isn't even intellectually, come on. Wait a minute, they voted for him, but now they're racist because they don't like his policies. And that speaks to those, the hypersensitivity that everyone has. It's not just blacks, it's whites too, because, you throw that race card out there and they cringe because, don't call me anything but that. And so it's, that whole hypersensitivity thing plays into it again. And so, with the activists on the left, particularly if they're black, they're always talking about, and Obama too, always talking about, we have to have this debate on race, this discussion on race, and they're always talking about that, yet people of their political ideology make that impossible.
Right. How is it that he's been able to push this agenda with the health care? We're looking at an immigration bill that I'm almost sure that they're going to try to slide amnesty in there somewhere. How is it that no one, I guess, like I said, that's what I guess that bothers me the most. That's one of the reasons I started my radio shows. How is it that no one from the left or in the media is actually even questioning any of this? I mean, he's just basically, is he getting a total pass on all these issues?
Well, he's getting a total pass because the entirety of the establishment press is of the same political ideology. And in addition to that, you have the hypersensitivity of people where issues of race are concerned. And if you combine that with a majority in the House and the Senate, I mean, it's a perfect storm of serendipitous occurrences for Obama. So it's everything that you're seeing is being relegated to the alternative press, talk radio, internet, WorldNet Daily, Fox News, and so it's everything. He's got the structure, he's got the power, he's got the press. So it's they're going to be delivering his message.
All right. And Erik, now if people want to learn more about you, obviously learn more about your book, is there a website they can go to?
Yes, they can go to erikrush.com. That's ERIKRUSH.com. And there are links there where you can, learn about me, find the book, links to my columns at WorldNet Daily, and I have some goofy stuff on there as well that's kind of fun. Just go to my website.
Excellent. And the book is in stores now?
Yeah, it's in stores. I'm not sure what stores it's in right now. I know that it's sold out in some places, and then it's gotten restocked in others. I know they were down to almost nothing on Amazon for a while, but now they've got a lot more in, and they've got some autographed copies left at the WorldNet Daily Superstore. That's WND.com. So they're out there.
Well, Erik, it's truly been a pleasure to have you coming on the show. I thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to come on here and talk about your book. People listening, again, the name of the book is Negrophilia, From Slave Block to Pedestal, America's Racial Obsession, with the author Erik Rush. So, Erik, thank you again for coming on the show. God bless you. Good luck with the book, and I hope to have you on again.
Thank you. God bless and have a great one.
All right, Erik. Talk to you later.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right. Well, I appreciate Erik coming on the show, and we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the issues that's going on this week. Denadine 855, I want you to call in. I'm about to text you. I'm about to send you the phone number. I want you to call in. Well, let's talk a little bit. We're talking on Twitter. This would be a great time for you to call in. I'm about to send you the number. It's 347. I just sent it on your Twitter. 347-996-3175. I want you to call in because me and you, we kind of argue a little bit back and forth, and it'd be good to get it out in less than 140 words, 140 characters. So give me a call. Let me know what you thought about Erik's book, about the conversation we had tonight regarding the Tea Party, the NAACP, obviously America's Racial Obsession. We talked about his book, and again, thank you, Erik, for coming on the show. If you have anything to say about that, give me a call, 347-996-3175. Come on, give me a call, Dina. Give me a call. I want to hear from you. You're tweeting and getting on me about the things I'm saying. Most of it's pretty cool, so we're cool with each other. I just want to hear from you. I want to hear what you think about the book and what we talked about tonight. Me personally, I want to kind of address a little bit more about the NAACP and their Tea Party resolution. Me, first of all, I'm a lifetime member of the NAACP. My father registered me as a member when I was a little boy, so I've been a member for pretty much all my life. And I've never, like I said, I've always participated. I used to participate in the dinners and that sort of thing as I was younger. But as I got older, I really wasn't involved that much. And quite frankly, it's because of the good job they did in the 50s and 60s that I didn't grow up in an environment where race was a big issue. I've always, I lived in Detroit, which was obviously predominantly black. But when I got to college, I went to a large, predominantly white university, and I never sat there and said, "Oh, look at all these white people." It just never occurred to me like that. I mean, I knew it, I could look and see around, but I always just looked at people as people, and that's something that I think this country needs to do a better job of. I'll go out here and give you my response to the NAACP and their resolution. I have spoke at a few different tea parties. I'll be at another tea party in Beaufort, South Carolina over the 9/11 weekend. I have experienced nothing but good things going to tea parties, speaking at them, and I have never seen or felt any kind of tension to where that was even a possible scenario of racial undertones that would make me feel uncomfortable. Now, I have no reason to lie to people. I've never been paid to go to any of these events, so I do it for free. I've drove 4 to 5 hours and spoke in Ohio, and I was not paid for that event. So people have to understand, I'm not being paid by these people to say this. I'm being quite honest with the fact that I've spoken at Tea Party events and have had a great time. And I've actually made friends with those people since, the places I go to. I stay in contact with these folks. And I just, again, it frustrates me that the NAACP would waste valuable time and resources going after the Tea Party movement when they are the least likely of threats to the African American community right now. Our biggest problem in the African American community is education. Detroit alone has a 47% illiteracy rate. That's on par with Haiti. And again, I don't see the NAACP marching up and down in front of the DPS, in front of the Detroit public school systems, organizing rallies for that, and organizing rallies against pretty much in all urban cultures and throughout these urban areas. You have these schools that are union ran and operated by the left, and they have not stepped up to improve these schools. It's been pretty much status quo by par. And again, this is one of the things I need people to understand is that they have the resources to make a difference, but because they're in bed with the Democrats and the left, that's almost like biting the hand that feeds you, and they won't go against the unions. They won't challenge these folks to improve, to make things better, because, and again, in my community in Detroit, where I'm from, you can go days, if not weeks, without ever seeing a white person. So you cannot blame your issues and problems on someone that is not there. You can't. The NAACP, again, should be focusing their efforts on, besides education, family values. A lot of the pastors and so on are involved in the NAACP, so I don't see why we can't focus more on traditional family values. Trying to eliminate the fact that 70% of our children are born out of wedlock in the African American community. Why aren't we challenging the educational system that teaches sex education at a young age as opposed to sex education? Why are we not teaching abstinence education? Why are we not doing those kind of things? Those are the kind of things that they can make an immediate impact on. Those are the kind of things you can protest and go to school boards and make your voice heard, and those are the kind of things that will have lasting impressions and lasting impacts on the African American community. And in no way do I want to diss and belittle the NAACP because, again, I'm a lifetime member. I grew up in it. My father is heavily involved here in the Detroit area. So I'm not gonna. I just believe that the resources on a national level. You've got from them fighting the Tea Parties to going to California and saying that they need to legalize marijuana because it's a civil rights issue. Now, to me that's an issue for the voters to decide. But you can't pick and choose with our civil rights issues. I don't see anywhere in there how that's a civil rights issue. So, again, the NAACP is kind of right now they have a scattered cause and they're spreading themselves thin. And what they ought to do again is focus on the things that could help put the black community back on a better ground. There were times where people weren't having children out of wedlock at the rate that we are doing now, but a lot of things obviously the African American community, a lot of us are, the black man is going to jail at a higher rate than anyone, but it starts right in the very beginning with education and opportunities to make things better. And that I would call the NAACP out on. They're telling us that, when I'm listening to them, they're saying we're not saying that the whole Tea Party is racist. What we're asking them to do is to remove racist elements to their party. Well, that's like someone coming to the NAACP and asking them to remove all the black separatists and all the black nationalists from their party. I mean, if you go to a NAACP convention, you will find people there that believe that we need to have our own separate states, cities, rules, everything, but those people aren't racist. Last year, Jeremiah Wright spoke in Detroit at the Freedom Fund dinner. He was the keynote speaker of the dinner, but yet this year you're calling out someone else, asking them to shut down what you guys consider, what the NAACP considers is racial overtones and negative racism, when they have people that they're inviting as their keynote speaker that spread nothing but hate himself. I don't discredit Jeremiah Wright for not being an intelligent man. I mean, he's well versed, well schooled on how he believes. But as a Christian, I can't subscribe to some of the notions he has out here. And again, the idea of hate and the message that he's spreading to people. And I know people that have attended his church, and they'll say all the great things he's done in the community. Well, those are things that community organizers do. And not to say that churches can't do that, but if you're spreading hate, you're giving a double message. There's nothing wrong with obviously providing for the African American community, and that part I don't have any problem with. If he's offering, clinics and things of that nature to help AIDS testing and those type of things, I don't have any issues with that whatsoever. But what I do have issues with is when you're sitting in front of your pulpit and you're damning America, saying that we possibly deserve 9/11. Those kind of things, I mean, I can't support that as an American. I can't support that as a Christian. I have an issue with that. And again, I'm glad that people like Erik Rush, glad that, Hannity spoke up on it, because people need to at least know these things. I mean, again, he's been given such a pass on so many issues that, again, if you replace the words that Jeremiah Wright was saying, instead of them being, white devils and white people, if some white person came out and said that against black people, it would be a firestorm, and rightfully so. But there cannot be this double standard. Again, we're talking about the NAACP, the Black Panther movement, and again, that's like me calling out the NAACP, telling them, hey, why don't you eliminate those Black Panthers? Why don't you tell them to be quiet? Keep a muzzle on them or something. So they're talking about killing crackers, killing their babies. And again, I didn't hear the NAACP condemning those statements. So again, have some equality to what you're doing. If you're going to call out Tea Parties for the few idiots that are there that might bring some signs that are inappropriate, my common belief is that when you show up at those kind of places with these kind of signs, people are telling those people to leave. They don't want that kind of activity. That's not what they're representing, because it's not a race issue. It's an American issue. It's about smaller government, less taxes. I mean, every time I go to the barber shop, I get criticized for my political beliefs, and I ask everybody in the room, raise your hand if you like more taxes. And I rarely get someone. I've had maybe one person for the strength of, I guess, defending Obama and his madness, they'll say, oh, yeah, I want higher taxes. That means I got to help out other people. I don't mind doing it. And I don't mind helping out other people. Let me decide the way that I want to help people out. Um, taking my money from me and basically diverting it to someone else is not going to make me a happy camper. I work hard for my money just like everyone else does, and we have a policy right now that's rewarding lack of productivity while punishing the people that are out here. People think that this health care bill is in any way over, and we're going to be learning stuff about this for the next couple years. What people don't seem to understand is that once this program is fully enacted, a lot of people think that, I work at a job, I work at, IBM, I work at, AT&T or something like that. I'm safe because I've got my benefits. Well, what's going to happen is things get tighter. Companies look to improve their bottom line, which is what they're always trying to do, is that they're going to start telling people, go get on that government plan another couple, in 2014. It's a lot of large companies that are looking at the cost of it, and they're like, hey, I'd rather pay the fine than to continue to go, because it's not only that if you have an insurance policy now, if it's not covering everything that the government feels that you should cover, which includes abortions and things of that nature, it's not going to be a government-sponsored program or a government insurance program, and you're going to still have to switch over. So people don't understand the ramifications, the long-term ramifications of it. And I hope that we get the House back in order in 2010, so they can either kill the bill or at least rectify it to where it's something that's going to help out people and not just be such a lightning rod for controversy and something that is, again, not made America feel better about the situation, but made it worse. The president today was in Holland, Michigan, bragging about and celebrating this new plant that opened and saying that how many jobs he's created with stimulus money, and also at the same time disrespecting Pete Hoekstra, who was a congressman and also running for governor here in the state of Michigan, who came there in his hometown to support it. Even though he didn't support the bill, he was there respecting the office of the president, respecting, the fact, like I said, he's running for governor here, and he came there to, as a guest, and the president actually called him out, said that, there are people here that didn't vote for the bill, but they can show up at the ribbon cutting ceremony, which I thought was, a low blow. He was there to support the local people there that were getting jobs, and he respectfully came as you're in his town, and the president called him out on that. And I think those are the kind of things, again, I just can't imagine if President Bush would have done something like that, if he would have taunted a Democratic candidate or a Democratic congressman in his home state, what would people have called him? How arrogant would that have been if President Bush had went to, I don't know, if he would have came to Detroit and talked about John Conyers? I cannot imagine the bad press and how people would have jumped on him for disrespecting John Conyers in Detroit on his turf, that kind of thing. And again, it's a total double standard. The media is totally in his back pocket. Come on, Dina, give me a call. I got 10 minutes left. Man, I wanted you to call in. It's because, now this is what my good friend Dina Den 855 told me. She says, because of the NAACP, you can speak on the radio, internet, TV, and at tea parties. I cannot agree more with that statement. Because of them, at that time in the 50s and 60s, while they were fighting for our rights, I stand here today able to do some of the things that I do. What I'm saying now is they've solved a lot of those problems. Let's deal with the urban issues of today, of 2010, and the biggest gap and disparity we have right now is in education. I don't see anybody standing up, fighting these union-ran and operated schools to make them more accountable. And again, that's why you have to push for more charter schools, more competition among schools, because again, they have the luxury of knowing that we're going to be back again next year. They can treat our kids like they don't know anything, give them a subservient education. And I'm not speaking strictly on just the teachers. It's the whole model of the way the public school system is set up. But the teachers are not being held accountable. There are teachers out here that are collecting the check at this point. They're not. They've given up, and we don't need people that are giving up on our kids. I mean, that's just the bottom line. My mom was a teacher in the Detroit public schools for 30 years, so I know what a good teacher is, and I know some of the frustrations that they deal with, in the system. But it's just almost it's a crime to see that the way, like I said, when you have a 47%, 50% illiteracy rate amongst adults in Detroit, our education system is failing us, and that's where America as a whole, we're losing ground to the rest of the world. They take education a lot more seriously. That's why you see that, it's almost like the joke when you see all the guys, the foreign guys, have all the engineering jobs and those kind of things throughout it's because they're taking education seriously. Come on, Dina, give me a call. The press told the truth because the hoaxer didn't, and he's done it before and they didn't. Why? No, this is the point I'm making, is that the president was in his hometown, and Pete, we know he didn't support the bill, but he still can't support with the program that he put on, the spending. And let's make it clear here, there was $150 million, I believe, that was sent there, and it averages out to about $500,000 per person working in that plant. So this, again, that's kind of like how we spend money. The government spends money on $800 toilets and things like that. If you let the free market handle these kind of things, because the government at this point is picking who are the winners and losers in these scenarios. And I think that's something, again, that we have to be careful on. Why are we letting the government choose who are going to be the winners and losers in business? And that's not the way it was intended to be. That's not what free enterprise is. That's not what capitalism is. These are the things that have made America great. Now, you could also argue some of the same things, capitalism, greed, and these kind of things are what has put America in the situation it is financially. But you take all the presidents combined, their debt, and you take what President Obama's done in the last two years, he's doubled what they've all spent together. And I don't see how even the biggest Obama supporter can't realize that at the end of the day, it's your kids, it's your grandkids. If you're an older person, you just couldn't believe that there would ever be a black president, and then we have one now. Okay, great, we celebrated that, but let's look at the issues now. And the bottom line is that this is not the same America as far as jobs as it was 20, 30 years ago, and we don't want it to continually getting worse. I don't want my money to be worth pesos in a couple of years. I don't want it to be a 40, 50, 60% tax rate because we're paying socialized medicine for the whole country. I mean, because essentially that's what's going to happen. At some point or another, they know that, and that's why they put all these different stop breaks in place to make sure that, because again, companies are going to start, sooner or later, going to start pulling away from, healthcare benefits. Why pay for it? I mean, as a business person, I think in terms of business. If I had employees and I'm already paying them a salary, and now I'm paying an X amount of dollars a month just on their health care benefits, and I know that there's a government program out there that's cheaper and more cost effective for my business, well, guess what? That person's probably going to end up getting sent to the government program, because if they can afford it and they're willing to deal with that problem, then so be it. And that's just how business is. That's how people would look at it. And we need to, again, all of us who have people who have the blessing to have a comfortable job where they're getting full benefits and that kind of thing. President Clinton balanced the budgeted clean slate. What did Bush do? Again, this is the whole point is it's 2 years into it now. How long are we going to blame Bush for this? I look at it just like the same way if you take a job and the person before you's always been messing up, you don't sit there and blame it on the last person. You go ahead and fix it. And throwing good money on top of bad money wasn't probably the solution. Healthcare, the financial reform bill just passed with the Rhino Scott Brown being one of the key people to making that vote go through. So now you're going to have it where people who actually have jobs, who were responsible, they're going to have a hard time getting a loan, because we're dealing with the fact that all the people that couldn't get loans, who crushed the market with all the great ideas of President Clinton and going all the way back to Jimmy Carter, making sure everyone's a homeowner, that kind of thing is you get a huge tax cut for insuring employees under HR. But you can also get only pay a $750 fine and you can pay a fine and it still comes out cheaper. So a tax credit or a fine, again, you're asking people to take a choice, and I don't think that's what people want to do. So, being listening in, I'm about to go off the air here. I got 10 seconds left. Thanks for listening to Conservatives Cool Talk Radio. This is your host, Wayne Bradley, saying good night and God bless you.